on my attention. My countrymen, they love their fiction. Words upon now, it's made with good intentions.
Welcome to 10200, the Politics and Media podcast. We're not independent anymore. We are the media now. God, it's bleak out there in the media environment that our little podcast is trying to tow the entirety of the New Zealand information sphere. I'm joined by my podcast co-hosts. Philip, how you doing?
Good to be back. It's nice. What a long and restful break we had too. That was what, a week, 2 weeks?
No, it was like 2 months. Yeah, but we just kept doing podcasts. That was the trick of doing a hiatus, is to not truly go on hiatus. It was just to not do Saturday mornings.
Change is as good as a rest.
Yeah. I was telling someone yesterday, we're going back from hiatus, and they're like, what? What do you mean? I've been listening to your podcast every week. But we are back for current events now, returning to a Saturday morning recording schedule. I'm also joined by Ginny. How you doing?
Hi, I am definitely not hungover. I definitely have no intoxicants in my body. That's how I'm doing today.
That's how we like it, because we're professionals here.
Yeah. Oh God, the fish mug. Sorry for anyone who's like just listening. I'm just watching Carl drink out of a huge mug.
So, too much has been happening. We've been managing to cover some specific issues here and there over the last few weeks, but there's nothing quite like a current events roundup. We're just going to be playing with more formats, I think, until the end of the year, which is basically going to be us saying like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And then kind of figuring out as we go. But today, we're going to do a little roundtable, I guess. What are the most hateful things? What's your most hateful thing, Jenny?
The most hateful things. I think one of the most hateful things yesterday that kind of weirdly came up at work was how it became illegal to wear or display gang patches. And the police just literally, minutes after it goes into action, just seizing people's shit, right? All across the country. And it's like, I think they arrested someone in a supermarket or something, and arrested someone on the street. Someone at work linked an NBR article about it, essentially. But it's just, what is this, right? Like, what are the police trying to do here? It's just to have this be the approach, and then consider the comments that were made very publicly by people like David Seymour. What was it, last week or the week before, about Nazi insignia? Like, this is the approach you're taking. You're going to arrest someone who is patched up in a supermarket and then be like, oh, this Nazi stuff though. Like, if someone wore the Klan hood, I guess it'd be okay. Like, they would just be kidding around. They would just be joking. Like, it's just completely ridiculous logic to me. Well, I mean, there is no logic, right? That's what it is. And I think I read somewhere as well that I guess in response to this, there are some organizations out there who might adapt their patches or insignia, because I think it's not quite clear exactly again what the criteria is that the police are using to determine what is or is not gang insignia necessarily.
I think it's mostly racial profiling, Jenny.
Probably, yeah. It's probably entirely skin color based, and not to do with any real like legislative demarcations here. But someone in my work made a comment yesterday. They were like, so what are the police gonna wear then if they're gonna ban gang patches? So yeah, again, continuing the trend of making these decisions, I think that most of the public are probably just like completely baffled by, and don't share the same values with the people who make the laws nowadays. So great, I hate that so bad.
Yeah, it's philosophically incoherent, right? Like, there's no justification for that kind of, it's classic like anti-civil liberties legislation where you just pick a list of symbols, literally. Like, the only way to make it even enforceable is to have a demarcated list of gangs, which you can do, right? You can just you can say these are the 10 symbols we consider quote unquote gang symbols. But there's no justification for that beyond, like, as you say, like demographic and profiling, because like practically speaking, imagine you're a cop. The nightmares, the PTSD. I know it's a hard life, right? But like, put yourself in the headspace of a police person. Practically, like, the only reason you would enforce this is in a situation where you don't have something else to throw at someone, right? So maybe you've been following someone, like you want to bring someone in, but you don't have anything else to pin on them yet. That's the only time you'll actually use it, is where you're like, well, fuck, like he's got a mongrel mob patch. Why don't we just go with that? You know?
Yeah.
I don't know,
Um,
Philip. I think they're also going to use it just for PR busts, where they're like, haha,
well,
look how
because
tough we are.
there'll be a lot of pressure, right? There'll be a lot of political pressure for the first couple of months, especially like before Christmas. They need to get some arrests under their belt, regardless of what the people are doing. But going forward, like if this is going to be an ongoing enforceable thing, it's one of those things you use much like marijuana, where you get arrested if you're young and brown and like potentially might cause a disturbance. But if you're a white man in a suit, people are like, oh, move along, sir, you know?
Mhm.
It's one of those like the wider the discretion you give the cops, the more racial profiling you're gonna see. One of those kind of things. And like that's well known amongst like lawyers and
And
defenders,
police.
prosecutors and police. Like they know that that's what it's for, right? But unfortunately it's one of those like populist angle crimes that I still think will probably go down quite well until we get some really shocking abuses of power. And even then, you know, the public has no sympathy with quote unquote gangs. Even if you ask them what is a gang, they'll be like, oh, they're the bad guys, right?
Mhm.
What does that mean? Like, you're right, Ginny. Like, philosophically, yeah, like the police are a gang, right? In all but name, like until they're demarcated as such. And like, if I start a gang right now, right? If I just say, okay, I'm a gang, and also the requirements to start a gang is like doing several murders, like I can just do that, and I can make a patch, but I won't be on the list of gangs, right? Because it's not demarcated as such. So it's an inherently like reactive process. And if the
Mm.
mongrel mob tomorrow is like, okay, we're changing our symbol to like uh pussy hats from Hillary Clinton era, right? Like, which they probably it's unlikely. But like, is that any less intimidating? The justification for the crime,
No, it's more intimidating somehow.
Yeah,
What
that
the
would actually be
justification, the
scarier.
justification for the legislation is intimidation, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously a duplicitous justification, but like that's how they're justifying it, is saying, oh, it's the intimidation that these patches cause. You know, imagine three like quote unquote mongrel mob guys around you, but they're not wearing the jackets, they're wearing pussy hats. Like, is that better? Do you feel more comfortable now? You know, it's not, there's no solution to that.
Yeah.
It's purely like ramping up antagonism and increasing like demographic justifications for what they
Yeah.
already want to be doing, right?
There's this demographic thing, right?
It
With
is.
the racial profiling and whatnot. But the kind of more insidious part of that, if it could get more insidious, is something that Jenny mentioned just before around David Seymour's comments about Nazi symbols and swastikas being kind of fair play. And that is that, you know, most members of the public are like, I'm not going to go and mess around with gang members, but I don't see them as an everyday threat, except when you're in rich white neighborhoods, which is where a lot of you know, the voices in the media, the people on the street who are afraid of gangs are like in Remuera and Epsom. Like, oh, they're gonna like put on an after party and be security at my child's high school and shit like this. We're like, oh, my kids are getting sold drugs by the gangs. Our family's gonna be corrupted, kind of stuff. Like just really imaginary shit. And the hidden lead there, I guess, is those people aren't afraid of Nazis because they know that Nazis aren't targeting them.
Mm.
And it was well done to that reporter, whoever it was, for putting Seymour on the spot about that, because it shows his kind of development as being openly a far right white supremacist, which, you know, we've known what he's doing for a while, but you don't really get clearer than that
Yeah.
from a politician until it's a little too late.
Yeah, I mean, just to sorry to interrupt, but just to jump in, like previous iterations of the Axe Party were explicitly against legislation like that, right? When the Axe Party was closer to being, I don't even think they were fully libertarian, but there was a while there where they were polling under 1%, where they were like philosophically reasonably coherent, and that's like libertarian principles, right? The state shouldn't be unjustifiably imposing on people's liberty, and what could be more an example of that than legislating what you can and can't wear, right? It's not even about behavior at that point. It's not about like any kind of like physical actions that those people are doing. It's an aesthetic preference, you know? It's like as anti-libertarian as you can possibly get. And as we said for years, ACT is going to do well when they give up on their libertarian principles and lie about it and become an actual hard right party. I've been saying this since this podcast started.
1 or 200, right again. Listen to us if you want to know what's happening in New Zealand.
David,
Yeah.
and
How
central
many years
politics.
ago did
You
you
were
say
right,
this?
David. You were right to listen to my advice for years and years, because there are no libertarians in New Zealand, and the philosophical coherence means nothing to most voters, right? It's much more successful to go populist hard right.
Yeah, and you
that's
get
what
caught
this
out
is.
on incest questions, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't be honest about that stuff. And like he won't be. And they've given up on all pretense of that with this like police state shit that's just as anti-civil liberties as you can get. And there was a time back in the day when I sort of first became involved in politics where ACT and the Greens were the parties you talk about when civil liberties is something that you care about, right? If you talk to like law school nerds in 2009 and you say which are the parties that care about civil rights and freedoms for individuals from like an increasingly authoritarian police state, like without like not being abashed, you'd be like, well, ACT is good on that stuff. Like they will fucking stand up and say, no, you can't. Like you can't come and take away our freedoms to do X. Like voting in prison, for example, right? Like they used to have a different policy on prisoners voting. And as they've become more authoritarian and less libertarian, of course they've changed their policy on that because they actually don't give a shit. They want to get more votes. Anyway, that's my ACT Party rant.
good hate. Good hate. Good choice, Ginny. Philip, have you got something? Can you get on the hate train with us?
Well, look, I was going to say, like, if I was going to be honest, I would say the same thing. That's absolutely the most frustrating
No,
thing.
no. We're in the
Isn't
business
it?
of politics, Philip. No honesty here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Take my own advice, right? Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the thing that I think has been most politically frustrating and, like, also duplicitous, as I've already said. But also, I think, like, not so much to hate on, but I think it has become more transparent over the last week. Luxons Ineptitude, which we've kind of always known, but the media seems to be catching up with the fact that he's not good at his job. Which look, I don't dislike that. I think that's good, but it does kind of reinforce that it takes the media kind of a year longer than it should to realize a lot of this stuff. Like we've always thought it was pretty clear that there are glaring gaps in his capacity to do stuff. But it's only been more kind of, quote unquote biased or incisive commentators who've made those leaps.
I think Justine for the podcast coined Christopher LinkedIn.
Yeah, which is
Oh,
going on, right?
That's
Like,
where that came from. Yeah.
Fucking yikes, that's bleak.
it's straight. That's correct though, right?
That
Like,
was when he was like appointed leader.
yeah, that's correct. Like it is. He's just a summation of all of your friends on LinkedIn's chat GPT generated like posts, right? He's not a human. He's like he's 3 chat GPT comments in a suit.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, but I guess it's good that people are sort of finally putting 2 and 2 together. And there's a reason he's never polled well as an individual. But I think it is a bit bleak that the country is like settled with this kind of loser, who no one actually likes, but is like, well, everyone has enough specific reasons to continue. Everyone on the right is like, well, we need him for reason X and Y, so what are you going to do? It really shows it's a naked explanation of power, I guess. Iron law institutions, right? All the individuals have enough reason to maintain the current status quo over the kind of shared interests. So yeah, situation continues.
Yeah, that I think that lag continues in a lot of areas of the media. But it's intentional as well, right? It's not just that they've failed to analyze it correctly. Like even at the beginning of the year, we still had a number of commentators trying to run the line that we just need to get to know Christopher Luxon. But I think as he does more overtly pathetic activities, and has like those kinds of responses to political pressure, and just for the ego of the people who have been cheerleading him, it makes it more difficult for them to be in his corner. So when Christopher Luxon is snapped or caught on video entering through the back door so he doesn't have to encounter protesters, that's fucking cowardly and pathetic. And if you're a commentator who's like, I'm incisive, I'm an experienced senior political reporter, and you're trying to make an excuse for that, or you're trying to ignore that, you get smeared with that same kind of pattern of cowardice and weakness. And you can say a lot of things about people in the media, but they're not experiencing ego death of any kind. They're not completely subsumed. They are attracted to power. And if someone is looking like they're not very powerful or looking like they're weak, they're far less likely to hitch themselves to that. Then doing stuff like setting up particular bills, like the Treaty Principles Bill, to be heard on days when Luxon isn't going to be in the House. And it's a normal day. He's not in the House. Yes, we get it. But why on this particular day, right? Like, he's avoiding it, and especially with the hīkoi reaching Wellington this week, his refusal to take any responsibility for national allowing Act in New Zealand First to do this to the country, and to continually just palm it off as, it's a coalition agreement. There's nothing really we can do. We said we'd do this. Well, everyone knows the facts of it now, and that they've allowed it to go to select committee for 6 months when they didn't have to. They're like allowing David Seymour to speak on it. Luxon is not being present to talk about or try and like unite the country around it or against it. They've got this absolutely fucking bizarre line that they're using to try and attack Labour, which is, it's only going to pass if Labour and the other opposition parties vote for it, because we're going to vote against it. And you're just like, it's sad. And you're right, it is hateful, though, that it's taken so long for the media to just be honest about this fucking destitute, hollow leader of the country. But, like, they're going to come out in the new year and say, Nationals turned over a new leaf. Like, I don't think this is a trend. It just happens that we're coming to the end of the year. Everyone's really fucking fed up. Everyone's neurotic and stressed over Christmas. And Christopher Luxon's swanning around, and it's really hard swanning around and hiding himself from any dissent. And it's just, it's hard for the media to attach themselves to that and still maintain any level of trust, as kind of minimal as that is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there is a serious like element to that, right? The comms, the Karl Rove thing of like attack the strength, like right-wing leaders don't need to be seen as the nice guy. So it's not devastating necessarily to say that Christopher Luxon like doesn't care about the poor people or whatever. Like, his voters didn't vote for him because he seemed like he cared more than the Labour Party, right? They wanted someone who with business credentials. They wanted a LinkedIn leader. But if you say that he's cowardly and is bad at his job, I think that gets much more to the heart of why people respect him, and that's the Karl Rove doctrine of undermine the strength, and it does more damage to the image of a politician. So I think like that's the big difference, And in the same way, although John Key polled insanely well as leader, I think it's an interesting comparison to think like has the leadership style changed that much, or has the country changed? John Key was kind of the right man at the right time for New Zealand politically in terms of like political expediency, and he was undeniably 1,000 times better at this than Christopher Luxon, and he wouldn't be acting the way that Christopher Luxon is, don't get me wrong. But I think Christopher Luxon's trying to do a John Key impression, but 10 years too late, right? Like, the country's not 15 years too late. It's not where it was when John Key was like on the ascendance. And the way that you respond to circumstances means everything in politics. You can't have an unwavering like style that you continue to use. And if you're trying to replicate something that happened 15 years ago, you're going to fail because circumstances have moved on. Like a week can be however long Lenin says it is, It's frustrating to watch, but I guess it is frustrating that that's the leader we have. But, flip side, I think it's good that people seem to be cottoning on. I don't expect any massive poll changes because, like I said, like his voters already voted for this, but I think we're starting to see the undermining of that in the mainstream, which is a positive. Like, the flip side of that is that this is a positive development because over time people will be like, I thought I voted for a negotiator or a professional businessman, someone who could hold together pro-business, blah, 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 and the economic quote-unquote recovery is going to take longer. there are all these economic indicators that are dragging out, and it's not like the opposition has their shit together, but neither does the government, right?
Yeah, not good. Not good. All right, my most hateful thing is the government prescribing Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. That is fucked up
Good
because
choice. Good
they're a
choice.
political party which has a huge support base, runs social services. You know, they're an entity. And it's to have that happen like basically not in public and then just be paraded around by some of the worst far-right Zionists in the country is like, yes, look what we got done. Yeah, you did, and it was like it's horrific. And I genuinely don't know what else to say about it. It's fucked up. And I hope they watch this space because this is the kind of stuff that's happened in the UK and the US where governments have used this kind of stuff to then paint left and alternative media organizations as giving support to or kind of promoting terrorism and then get them under terrorist legislation. And this, I think, is potentially the first kind of edge of that because it's such a huge fucking wide net to throw. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a really bad sign for civil liberties in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's a really good pick, I think. That and as an indicator, as you say, like that's a really bad direction to be setting. And it doesn't say anything good about either foreign policy direction or civil liberties. And like you have to take those two things together. Like those you can't really disentangle the way that the New Zealand government treats overseas organizations from the way they treat local organizations. If you want any shred of like political integrity, I think that's like kind of where you have to start. And you're right, like there's you can't just unite an entire organization under the brand of baddies, which is, that's why I've always campaigned against the concept of terrorist as like a nominative concept. Like I don't think it does anything good. Like there's no valence there that I think is good for
terrorism, you
for the
mean
left.
armed people from the global south?
Well, exactly right. I mean, it is a coherent category in so much as it can be cohered to your enemies, right? Like in the same way as gang patches. Anyone can be a terrorist if you decide they are.
It's the same. I just want to be clear. It's the same legislation. It's one is just for the rest of the world and one is for domestic politics.
Oh, it's so weird that imperialism comes home to the imperial core sometimes. I wish someone had written something about this. If only there was Google it.
Yeah, it's like you throw the imperialism out and like abroad, and then it returns home almost automatically.
Just Google it. If you're at home on your computer, just Google it and see if anything comes up. And if it does, I don't know, maybe read it front to back several times and let us know. Sorry.
Ginny, how are you feeling about the civil liberties
Honestly,
aspects?
that further to the point that you were making about how it reflects a domestic situation, also regarding civil liberties, I was thinking about the gang patch ban and who I guess have been really vocal about it recently. I know we had just lost Andrew Costa. Well, I say lost like he died. He didn't die. He's gone off to the other government job in the sky. But then I remember that I think it was Emmy who was tweeting about his replacement.
Chambers.
Richard Chambers.
Chambers.
Famously like really, really like happy for people to gun happy, for example. I was just someone who believed that in March the police used appropriate force to clear protesters from Parliament in 2022. Just like a real good guy with normal opinions all around, and obviously really tight with the crowd in the coalition now, who I think one thing that they really disliked about Costa when they were the opposition was his policing by consent thing. That the police must maintain the support of the public to hold legitimacy, and they'd be like, nah, like fuck that.
And this is just a statement of like reality for the
Exactly.
record.
Exactly.
That's a Robert Peel. It's from that's how the police were invented, was through that concept, by the way. If people don't know the background, like that is the concept of police. It can't, like, policing by consent isn't woke nonsense. This is like from the time that the cops were literally invented as an organization. Robert Peel, like,
Yeah.
Google it, folks. Like,
it's honestly insane that National would call the guy that's the outgoing. I think was it Simon Bridges who was calling him like really woke or something?
Well, it's because he uses the word consent. It's because he uses the word consent, which is a woke word now.
some awful shit like that, right? And now I think we're in a position whereby this person who has come in, I think Richard said that he was really, really keen to crack down on gangs. For example, wanted to use the full force of the law, I'm quoting here from RNZ article, full force of the law to disrupt gang and organized crime within communities across New Zealand. And obviously he's echoed full faith in strong and decisive leadership in the current government, which we all know is fucking bullshit. So I think like what we just said about how civil liberties at home, and the ones abroad are being affected, I think obviously while Luxon's government is horrendously incompetent, and couldn't like social media or strategy their way out of a shoe box, they do have the right people in place to enact their ridiculously authoritarian schemes, right?
Yeah.
Like they just have a bunch of yes men. And that's what it is when you hire like a LinkedIn CEO as a boss. He has a bunch of middle manager yes men. And that's exactly what the situation is here now.
Yeah, I think like this has been really clear with a bunch of the appointments, right? Which are just making without kind of public support. So we saw the Human Rights Commission stuff as well, which was back in the House being talked about this week too. With just these like horrible reactionaries being put into civil liberties roles. And we know everyone knows what the fucking game is, but the National and ACT are like, oh, these are really upstanding people, and haha, they used to do stuff for Labour and the Greens, and you're like, you fuckers, like everyone knows what the fucking game is now. Everyone knows that they're speaking out the side of their mouth, like that this isn't real, that it is just PR, but they're still getting away with it as like they're not being laughed out of the room yet, and that's the really frustrating thing to me in terms of the coverage and the reporting, like. If someone's saying that and like getting a whole bunch of laughs from the rest of their MPs behind them, like ha, good fucking point, mate, and media and the public aren't looking at them and going just like, who the fuck are these people? Then you've got a little bit of a problem in terms of how the elected relate to the electorate. And I just wish media would step up and do something about it. And you can hear it here, folks. Listen to 10200, like, subscribe, share. Lots of footnote hateable things this week as well. One of the big ones is the new move against trans healthcare. We will be recording about that tomorrow. So we're not going to go into detail about it today because I want to give it a non-current events treatment where we're not just dipping in on it, because there's a lot to get into there, especially the way that the coalition partners of National ACT and New Zealand First are just saying some really nasty shit and just going all in on the anti-trans rhetoric. Any other little footnotes that we're not going to get into? Any other little hateful things? I think geopolitically, you've got Ukraine firing missiles into Russia. That's not going to start World War III, surely. Ongoing situation in Gaza and the West Bank, and Lebanon and Syria and everywhere else, and Yemen that is being targeted by the US empire via Israel. We released an article, we syndicated an article yesterday, so that's up on the 10200.nz, just about the ongoing horrors of genocide in Palestine. So go give that a read. Yeah, but there's lots of good shit out there too. It really is feeling like we're at an inflection point. And how fucking good has the hīkoi been? Totality.
Yeah, that's been really good. I think the overseas attention on it has also been both encouraging, and I feel like I've already whined about this to Carl when we hung out earlier in the week. But I remember actually I was at the office, as I do because I'm a corporate slave. And then I had a bunch of people, a bunch of my friends from the States were like, oh my God, hey, like we just saw this on the news, like it looked really, really insane. It was so impressive, blah, blah, blah. I had a friend as well who I think saw there was a hīkoi solidarity march, I think in London as well. And they went in London, they're like, hey, like what is this? Like what's going on? And I was like, blah, 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 here. But I've been surprised at how much coverage overseas it's gotten, actually, and how much like resounding support it's gotten from a lot of, I would say, my friends who are part of the quote unquote global left, and how that's also been framed up. Of course, we've seen some really, really awful stuff about like warrior myths and, Moriori, and I'm not going to name that one commentator residing in Australia or something, who's also like a China hawk who's really bad at his job, and some really awful things being said about the hīkoi in general. But I think it's interesting to contrast that against the treatment that Te Pāti Māori has gotten from Parliament and also from contestants in NZ First, and as to how David Seymour, obviously, I don't even know why he has a mouth, but saying things that like the hīkoi and the people that are protesting around this are undermining the mana of Parliament, and all his usual anti-race, his usual anti-Māori rhetoric, and that how by protesting in this way that they're behaving dishonorably, blah blah blah, which I think to me is just ridiculous. Shane Jones saying that Te Pāti Māori and people that are protesting as part of the hīkoi were practicing TikTok culture, which is also ridiculous. Just some of the most intense and unfounded critiques, I think, of the movement locally. And I think when you hear these up against the widespread public overseas international support it's gotten, these people locally, our coalition locally, sounds increasingly unhinged. You know? So that's
Yeah.
been kind of nice.
And divorced kind of from the reality of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the like really nasty stuff that's out there online. And when Vijay Prashad was here and we had him on the podcast, one of the things he was saying was like, this is like Pacific is where a lot of stuff is going to be happening. And Aotearoa is going to be at the forefront of that in terms of resistance. And so as soon as we saw this act of resistance in Parliament, and everyone like a lot of the world is ready to engage with this kind of stuff, right? Whether they do it with a little bit of lack of knowledge around what's happening or not, and if they're a little bit misguided, you know, they're like, wow, this is someone really standing up. And you saw a lot of people saying, oh, we should do this, or like, wow, why isn't this happening where we are? Like, this is so amazing to see this really unapologetic act against the way that Western governments, in particular, are moving against Indigenous peoples and against the rights of their countries in general, I guess. And immediately, as soon as there's a hint that this could be like the tinder, right, the spark, even you had this incredible coordinated response from the far right and from that kind of like web of political operatives just starting to peddle like this obscene, not just disinformation, but just outright just slurs, you know, just like not even trying to engage with it, not even trying to give disinformation, just trying to like make it seem weak by abusing anyone publishing about it, like just hundreds and hundreds, like a whole bunch of
Flood
stuff.
zone with shit is the phrase you're looking for.
Huh?
Flood the zone with shit is the phrase you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it was that. Like because they're not really flooding the wider zone. It's very targeted. So we had a whole bunch of what's the word? Posts and stuff go really viral from within Aotearoa. And for every single one of those, there were just hundreds, if not thousands, of bots and sock puppets just going insane, like trying to push this. And then you had a whole bunch of like big name commentators all coming out with the same lines at the same time. I'll take Ginny's lead and just not name any of them, but you would have seen them. And it didn't fucking matter. All they did, and this was really gratifying. You know, usually when a far right person or a right winger does something really out the gate, we have to have that conversation like, are we, if we report on this, if we like comment or try and dunk on this, are we just spreading the reach of it? And it was nice to see that flipped because they really just helped us this time around. And they look like fucking idiots because it was fucking cool. And when they're out there saying, this is actually really dumb, it actually ruins their brand and makes them look like they're fucking weak. And that was gratifying. That was really good to see.
100%. That's what I really thought was the most exciting thing in the last week. Like, yeah, you stole my talking point exactly. I was going to say, you know, 10 underinformed bros in the US sharing a video of whether it's Haka in Parliament or 50,000 people in front on the lawn, you know, stamping and speeches and stuff. It's all good. Like that is all good media for us. We lose nothing from that, right? You don't have to have any kind of centrist kind of discourse about like, oh, is this divisive? Yes, it is, and we're going to win, right? Like it is.
Yeah, that's fucking right.
That's a good thing. Like we shouldn't pretend that we're in the majority. It's okay. Like look at any poll taken of Indigenous rights issues in New Zealand history. The cutting edge is not in the majority, and that's okay, right? it's good to air this stuff and get it into the open and start these fights because we win. We're not going to win today, but 50,000 people, that's like, I think 50,000 is a slight underestimate, but maybe not by much. My gut says maybe 60 based on the different estimates I've seen. But, numbers are hard to quantify, but I think it is important to recognize probably the biggest single location protest in New Zealand history was over this event, right? At a hīkoi that was the summation of something that was given very short shrift by the media. Like, sure, there was plenty of attention, but it was treated as much, much less seriously than, for example, the climate school strikes for climate marches that basically had New Zealand Herald saying, take the day off school, like bring your kids, bring your
They
babies.
did the opposite for this. They were
Exactly.
publishing ACT Party talking points saying like, oh, you have to like we'll mark you all as truant, which is like I just want everyone to think about both Erica Stanford and David Seymour coming out to tell parents that their children were going to be marked truant if they're away for the hīkoi. Like, and directing from the ministry down to teachers. So teachers were getting missives saying you are not allowed. Like, if someone doesn't turn up today and they're not here because they're on the hīkoi, you have to mark them as an unjustified non-attendance. That's fucking fascist. That is outright fascism. That's absurd. It should and got no coverage.
It's top-down political interference in ministry's business for sure.
And why not? And in parents' business and like how people like treat their children. That's fucked.
And again, if we had a Libertarian Party in this country, they would be staunchly against that behavior. But no, of course, they're leading the charge against it because there are no Libertarian parties and none of our right-wing parties care about civil liberties.
That's how fucking scared they are as well, right? Like, you don't do this shit unless you're shit scared. Like,
it shows that you're winning. Like, all of these responses, I think, show that Indigenous rights are winning in this country, and it's really exciting. It's really, really exciting to see. Like, maybe the most heartening single protest I've ever seen in my lifetime in New Zealand. Like, and not just because of the numbers and the success, but because of the hysterical reactions. And like, I use that word advisedly. Like, the way that people have responded, like Winston Peters making an absolute fool of himself, trying to downplay the numbers and say that, oh, it wasn't that serious, mate. You look scared and out of your depth. And it is absolutely heartwarming to see, like really exciting. Yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, I don't say that, without thinking. I've been thinking about it since it happened and trying to compare to past protests. But in terms of like the options this puts on the table, I think really like this could be opening a new chapter in New Zealand history for the left and Indigenous rights. And like, gotta hand it to David Seymour. Thanks, mate. Like, appreciate it.
Fuck you, Philip.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's the exciting thing, right? Like, this will work for David Seymour. I think, like, a lot of people have said, oh, he's so stupid for doing this. No, I don't think so. It'll work. He needs to hit 10% in the next election, right? And he will, based on this. If the other parties back away and he can keep saying, I was the only one who supported the racist legislation, he can easily get 10% off that. The majority of national voters will basically be anti-hīkoi philosophy, and that's okay, right? They're the reactionary, they're the revanchist kind of farmers type mentality in this country. That's okay. We know those people exist, right? We don't need to deny that. The other people, it's okay that that's the minority. We can win 75% of the country and not have them. That's fine. Like, we live in a democracy. But David Seymour's recognized that, and he knows the base he's going after. And we on the left can recognize that we can go after our base, and neither of us are talking to the same people, right? But we can't be the ones not doing that while he does it. That's how we lost in the last 5 years.
And you can't be reaching out your hand to those people. I'm like that doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. Like, we're past that. We're not in the age of politics. You can get them with other stuff. They can get them by giving them free money. Like, but you're not going to be able to convince some of this core part of the base that Māori deserve rights. I'm sorry. Like, stop with the centrist bullshit. Keep in mind as well that this is like the first clash. The entire and we've been saying this for a long time, and now other commentators are starting to understand as well. Well done, everybody, for being a year behind minimum. This is about building narrative and discourse for a citizens-initiated referendum, which they will use to go into the 2026 election as their wedge issue, just like Brexit, just like border wall shit, to cleave off that really racist core and feed it to ACT and to whoever else wants to take a bite out of it. And we need to be ready for that. And the hīkoi has been like, we are fucking ready, but we also need to be aware that they will cheat because this referendum is going to be so poorly worded. And even on like some lower stakes referendums, we have had wording that has confused the fuck out of people. This referendum is going to be like, do you want to debate about the treaty? Yes or no? And a whole bunch of people are going to say yes. You know, it's going to be that bad. So it's not going to be like, do you want Māori to have rights? Like, do you want Māori to have the rights that were granted under Te Tiriti? It's going to be, oh, what do you think about the British version of the treaty or some shit like that? Like, so I really want people to understand how much they're going to cheat. Like, I really like the energy of, yeah, okay, we'll have a referendum, we'll fucking win. But you need to just be really clear about what the topography of this issue is going to be, and how it's going to be run out strategically. It is not going to be fair. They're not going to, in a just world, they will ask a question that makes sense. And on that basis, you like the pro-Indigenous rights crowd would get maybe 70%, and I think. But it's not what the question is going to be. You know, it's not what the discourse is going to be. And from what we've seen over the last year, media are going to be on the side of ACT. They're going to be pushing this in a way which is intentionally divisive and muddies the waters and tries to make the electorate think that the question being asked is different than what it is. So it's contingent on the rest of us, everyone involved in this struggle who's showing solidarity with Māori around this. And, you know, there's already been some good work around this, to understand that and help to reframe it at every fucking opportunity. And the really important way to do this, and I also think it's true, which is this is not just about Te Tiriti and Indigenous rights. It's about the ability of capital to do whatever the fuck it wants and extracting resources from Aotearoa and from the people here to make them indentured workers, to like get rid of regulations, to make this into a colony again, and a way that we'll be moving away from, I guess I'd say. That's what it's about. And Māori are our safeguard against that. I really need people to understand this. Like, this movement, the hīkoi, it would not have happened without Māori. That is the team. That is who we should be on the side of. And I think the left has really fucking struggled to understand this. And again, you know, we've blowing our own horn a number of times here, but we've been saying this since day one on the podcast. Like, you cannot divorce the left in Aotearoa from Māori. And if you're doing that in any regard, you're fucked up. You're gonna lose. So yeah,
and to be clear, like we're not talking about individual, like that's not even a racial, let me just assume that I know what you're talking about. That's not a racial no, that's not about individual ethnicities. That's about organizational structures that can organize 50,000 people in the space of a few weeks to be in one place at one time. Like iwi, hapu, marae-based level organizing. There's nothing else in New Zealand that's as strong as that, right? There's
little else in the world.
And you have to reckon with that. Like, if you're a leftist in any sense of the word, I think you need enough materialist sensibility to see what are the current functions and apparatuses in your country, state and non-state apparatuses. And you just cannot deny the power in Te Ao Māori when it comes to organizing. Like, even if you thought you could, you definitely can't after Tuesday. So I think it's time to, like, if you want any kind of even, you know, center-left reorientation of the country, I think you need to take a look inside yourself after Tuesday and think, okay, what does that look like in a country where the only consistent organizational apparatuses are the ones that can turn this kind of thing out? Like, it's the only choice we have, I think, from a strategic perspective. And that's, you know, I'm not speaking morally at all. I'm just speaking materially. Like, this is the country we're in. These are the organizations that exist. Unions have been withered down to skeletons of their former selves. They'll turn out. That's great. But
yeah, they did turn out too.
They did turn out, and decent numbers. I'm not talking down the unions, but you just have to reckon with what exists. And this is the country we're in. So yeah, there's no use pretending this is America, right? This is New Zealand. And yeah, Te Ao Māori is absolutely like our best and probably only hope of an organized left in this country. So glom onto it. Learn Māori, show up to a marae, like start participating in shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also one of you said, but not America. That's a mistake that the right is making as well. They think they can do stuff here like they've done in the UK and in America. You can't just cookie cutter it like that. And you see that mistake happen again and again, where they just use weird terms about stuff, and then their electorate just goes, "What are you talking about?" Right? Because it's just wholesale fucking imported. Like they are tapped into the Atlas network. They are tapped into XYZ. They're getting all their talking points from elsewhere. They're getting all their policies from elsewhere. The fucking funniest thing, just to wrap up this particular topic, the fucking funniest thing happened yesterday, which was Todd Stevenson from ACT putting a complaint into the speaker that he wanted everyone who got involved in the Haka to basically be censured, to be told off. And it's just like, man, not even David Seymour was willing to put his name on that one. This is how fucking pathetic they've become. What just the most absurd amount of hormone to energy, eh?
Yeah.
It's just the most, oh my goodness. It's so fucking funny to see them. I'm going to say reduced to that, but they've always been this, right? But to reduce to revealing that publicly, that this is what they've got in the face of a 50K plus hīkoi, actively like directed at them, is to write a little note to the Speaker of the House to tell people off. Oh, you poor babies. Ginny, you got anything that you're really liking this week?
Liking, oh,
Liking?
no. I
Loving?
mean, do I ever like anything?
I
Like,
don't know,
truly.
gacha games, K-pop.
I actually have a lot to say about a gacha game, but I won't say that on this podcast. I'll save that for. I was like, It was one of the things where I was like, wow, like being alive in this climate politically feels like a real it's over moment. And then sometimes a gacha game I play will have a really big update, and I'm like, oh, we're so back. But like, I don't think that really is how it works for everyone else. So not so great. But I think I wanted to. I guess maybe like this is like a special mention, but it's a very small thing. I was feeling really down, over the state of how no one's raking Luxon over the coals for anything, even though his press appearances have been anything. He's been, completely incoherent, right? His response to most media reporters, critiquing him has just been, I'm Christopher Luxon. Like, I'm the Prime Minister. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, someone give this guy some media training, surely. But I think I saw some photos of him maybe 2 or 3 days ago when he was being a little bitch, and commenting publicly on the protests, and his new eyebrows looked horrendous. So that made me feel good. I was like, whatever's happening here, like, could you at least be fascist and stylish? You can't be fascist and like look like someone drew eyebrows on a watermelon with Sharpie. Like, pick your battles, honestly. And seeing him in that state, doing public appearances, looking obviously very ashamed of his horrific eyebrows, I felt good. And part of me was like, maybe his stylist is part of the resistance. Maybe whoever works on his brows was like, yes, actually, this guy needs to look like a clown in public, and I'm part of the left, and that's my job and that's my duty. So
Everyone has a small part to play.
exactly, that was a little patch of sunshine in my week that was otherwise pretty horrific. So
And Philip, you said I stole your point, but like, do you have another one?
Oh, I mean, obviously the hīkoi, like anyone on the left in New Zealand is going to say the hīkoi was by far the most exciting thing that happened this week. You'd have to be
mm,
some kind of psychopath or racist to not say that.
mhm.
But footnote, Brazil police accusing Bolsonaro of involvement in coup attempt. Finally, beautiful. I love that. I
I
love
wonder
that.
what the difference will be between that set of investigations and how the Dems fucking mishandled Trump.
Exactly. I mean, that's why I think it's because you have an actual left wing might be generous, but kind of centre left strong party apparatus in Brazil, with massive popular support. So I think it's going to be worlds apart what happened with the rehabilitation of the instant like prehabilitation of Trump.
Oh, good
It's
word.
going to be. I think it is going to be really interesting to watch. It's been in the works for a while as a long-time Brazil watcher. Long-time listeners will know. I predicted a coup in Brazil when Bolsonaro was elected, and I
Mm.
was wrong. I'm very happy I was wrong, but turns out he was planning a coup when he lost.
He just couldn't do it. He just
He
couldn't
just
do it.
didn't. Yeah, which is going to be really interesting to see why, I think. Like we
Mm.
had a few podcasts at the time talking about the how integrated the Brazilian military is with both parties, and I think that's going to be what comes to light, is that there are high up members in the military connected to all different factions and different industrialists. It's going to be really interesting. I'll probably have to do a podcast about it in the next several weeks.
Sick.
When I've
You better. Like I'm
it's
holding you to that one, Philip.
fascinating. No, it's fascinating
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's, at this point, it's completely untenable that Bolsonaro wasn't personally involved. It was, it's been kind of assumed for a long time when every single person around you is
Like hiring
implicated
assassins and shit.
by documents. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no way he didn't know that his entire team was planning this operation, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the ramifications of that. So watch this space, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good lesson potentially for the left in general, even as you say, Lula isn't like a raving communist, about how to use power. Like,
He's good at power. Like, say what you want about Lula, he knows how to use the state, right? So
yeah,
it is
yeah,
going to be really interesting to see how he leverages that.
yeah.
And
And I think we're in an age where when the left has power, they actually do need to put people down. And I don't mean that like execute them. I mean like ensure that they're never an electoral threat or a political threat again. Not by executing them necessarily, but yes, using the institutions and powers that are meant to work against far-right operatives killing the country, and like just murdering people, and actually creating consequences for those, because that's been a massive issue for liberals in particular, is their rhetoric around institutional powers and like the rule of law and et cetera, as well as the painting of figures like Trump as being fascists, and being an extreme threat to democracy, and that there will never be elections again, and then just rolling over and saying, "Oh, best man won," and you can't do that. You just like the Dems just destroyed their electoral brand forever, like on that basis, and they'll keep limping along. But they're done. They're fucking done at this point. You can't run an entire campaign against one man and then just roll over for him. That's obscene. That's like now everyone knows you'll never use power, and like you lose all the people who want a strong man, and you lose all the people who wanted you to do stuff. Like, oops, big mistake. And liberals need to learn that. And the left needs to learn it as well. Although I think like the further left you get, the more you understand it. You just don't have that power to wield for some weird reason. No, yeah, you're definitely doing a Brazil podcast. Yeah, just drop it into my lap when it's ready. I think last point for the week. ICC arrest warrants. Problematic, of course, and we've talked about that previously. We've had a couple of podcasts about it. We've got a big article up there called "The Poisoned Chalice of the ICC," because we know it's an imperial, a colonial apparatus more than anything else. I think it was Karim Khan himself, the head prosecutor, who said that someone came to him and said, "Oh, why are you using the ICC for this? It's only for Africans," essentially. And nonetheless, this is a signal from global institutions that something is shifting, to have issued arrest warrants for both Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. I think 124 countries, last I checked, had said they would execute the warrants if given the opportunity. Obviously, holdouts. I believe we still haven't seen any response at all from the New Zealand government or Minister of Foreign Affairs. Definitely hadn't yesterday afternoon, which means they haven't just taken the same line as like the UK or Germany, which is to say, we're not going to do this. We're going to either, we need to keep the diplomatic channels open to try and stop this, or this is anti-Semitic, right? Like that's the kind of range of people who are still siding with Israel over this particular change. Philip, do you think, what do you think? Is this a signal that world governments and even Western institutions are starting to be like, oh wait, this is really bad. Maybe we should do something about it.
I don't know. Good question. I think number one, it's like the ICC has been, I think, leaning towards this for a while. I think it is heartening that they pulled the trigger. But number two, it creates a more obvious cleavage between the countries that are still clinging to a rules-based international order and the countries that have fully jettisoned it. So it's going to be interesting to see which side countries pick down the line, including New Zealand. We have been like in the past we've been more in the camp of the former. I mean, certainly more than some of the countries that have already said they'll execute the arrest warrants. But our leaning towards the US in the last couple of years has been pretty disheartening, as we've harped on about quite a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see how much that agglomeration of Western sympathies has built up momentum. And the longer every day that passes, the more disheartening it is that New Zealand didn't immediately say, yeah, there's a prima facie case. Of course the ICC has jurisdiction over this, but yeah, with our increasing kind of US Western hegemony, anti quote unquote rules-based international order ties, it is a bit of a test. I think it's gonna be a line in the sand for a few countries, and New Zealand's a good example of that, because we'll be materially impacted not by the result of the case. I'm not expecting Netanyahu to jet off and visit us, visit Queenstown or whatever, but it's who you align yourself with, right? That's going to be there'll be nerds up all night at the moment in MFAT drawing those. What are those four-quarter things? Ginny, you're a corporate stooge. What's the one where it's like strengths, weaknesses? What are those things called?
Uh,
The four quadrant things?
oh, the one that's like four corners.
Opportunities, strengths. What is it called? Those, you know what I'm talking about.
I can visualize it. I can visualize
It
it.
hasn't got a name.
I was really hoping you'd jump in
It's
there.
just a concept. No, it does have a name, and we're going to leave this
Oh
in.
no,
So
it is. It's the SWOT analysis. I'm
What?
stupid.
Thank
It's
you.
strengths,
Yeah.
weaknesses, opportunities, and it's threats. That's what
Thank
it
you. Thank you. Yeah. Cut that out, Carl.
maybe.
Yeah, SWOT. Someone's doing a SWOT analysis in FAT right now, right? To see like
Yeah.
how exactly we should respond. And I think it'll be quite nuanced. Like I don't think it'll be a straight we support and will enforce ICC arrest warrants. And I don't think it'll be the US, UK, like this is illegitimate. We actually hate international law now. Um, Wild, just absolutely wild to see some of that stuff coming out, right? Like no pretense that international law has any validity anymore. Just
Yeah.
fully turning the page on that. It is going to be really interesting to see how that, and like it opens an opportunity for countries like China, I think. Like we don't have time to talk about this, but how are the future superpowers going to react to this, right? Like the
Mm.
BRICS, that's a much more interesting conversation, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's envisioning the next century, like how are they going to treat the world when the dying light of American empire has finally like closed its fucking Terminator eyes and melted into the lava or whatever.
What do you reckon? Benjamin Netanyahu, exiled from Israel, serving in the Trump administration?
Oh God, don't even joke about that. Like the non-zero possibility that is actually just so disgusting and galling. And as Lip just said, it was just so. I mean, I expected this from Biden. I expected Line to be like, "We stand by Israel no matter what," but still just horrific to hear in practice. Especially considering what other people are saying in response to this, like Africa, for example, reminding people to uphold the Rome Statute, and then America being like, "Actually, who cares? Who
Yeah.
cares at
No.
all about rules-based order and about human rights?"
Yeah.
So.
It's
I
served
don't
us
know
as a
why I
pretense up till
expected
now,
the
and
attitude to change in the States after the election. I don't know why I thought maybe people would become more woke about the genocide thing, given that it was such a thing which I feel like really divided and I hate this group and this cadre anyway, but the quote unquote American left was so up in arms about how to treat the genocide. And I thought maybe post-election we have some clarity. Like maybe we've all sat down, we've regrouped, we've had to think about it, and we've thought, you know what, maybe it wasn't worth like dying on this hill and being like, yes, I would support a genocide here, like that would be okay. Like maybe it wasn't worth dying on that hill, given the election's outcome. But I see no reflection at all from the Democratic Party in the US, unsurprisingly, and just disappointing all around. Disappointing all around. Um, and I think the EU's attitude specifically towards this being so different from the UK, it's just been interesting to watch as well, I feel. I would say Germany sort of like playing the 50-50 here, being like, we have a really, what did they say? I think it was the Chancellor said they had a quote unquote unique relationship with a great responsibility for Israel. I
you?
was like,
Is that what it is?
yeah, that was like interesting choice. You really have worded it in that particular way. So yeah, and I think we talked about like Germany's rearmament recently. Potentially we might have mentioned it. So I mean, great line to run at the same time as this is happening. You know what I mean? Like really heartening to know that that's the stance that you're taking while you're deciding that rearmament now is a possibility for country because it's just been long enough that the world has moved on from what you've done. So fun times, so good.
Yeah. Hey, that has been the first episode back of Current Events since the hiatus. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Philip, Ginny, for joining us to co-host. I'll link to the Twitters in the summary. So we're not going to do the plugs unless either of you have released some content.
No.
That you want to plug? No? Okay, great. Everything's in the summary. Our Patreon as well. We're back. We're trying to do stuff. If we want to be the media, we need lots and lots of money. So please give us a hand. It's actually it's really hard to build a newsroom with $0. So yeah, if you like what we do, if you think that we need more of this and at a far greater scale, if you think we're not doing enough, join our Patreon, give us some dollars. But also to share, like get the word out, help us increase the audience, because then some of those people might give us money, which is also great. That's us. We'll be back. I'm recording twice more in the next 2 days. So that's going to be fun. Got some really great guests coming up. We're going to maybe increase the pace. We'll see how I do. But when I have nothing to do over the Christmas holidays, that's what I tend towards. I'm going to be on Philip's back to get this Brazil fucking episode. You better fucking do it, bro. And yeah, we just want to bring you heaps of cool stuff. So get involved, reach out, come and chat to us on Twitter, and we'll see you next weekend.
If artifice is art, then I'm living a pointless life, but learning all your lessons. Fucking politics, there's no distinction. The road's upon now. It's paved with good intentions, and I'll admit that I'm at a loss for what to say when they criticize a cost me ought to stay. 'Cause I live amongst the people every day in this vindictive, forgetful fucking rain. It feels like we're on the road to hell.